Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to another event as part of the Institute of Politics Speaker Series in collaboration with International House and their Global Voices program. My name is Steve Edwards. I'm the Executive Director of the IOP. We are thrilled to be back here in this room. It's fitting to be in International House as we welcome tonight truly one of the most revered and acclaimed and best known broadcast journalists on the planet today, Mr. Jorge Ramos. As many of you know, tonight's event is part of the IOP's ongoing speaker series where we bring leading figures in the world of politics, public policy, and journalism to campus to share their thoughts on leading issues of the day. We have a number of events upcoming this week and next. You can find out more about all of the events at politics.uchicago.edu. That's our website. Next week, at Ida Noise, we will have a conversation with our very own David Axelrod and Ray LaHood, longtime Republican member of the U.S. House of Representatives and former Secretary of Transportation, where they will be talking about the road to bipartisanship in this acrimonious age of politics. So that's coming up next Thursday night, November 5th. We will be turning the floor over to you for your questions after Jorge does a short presentation. We'll have a discussion among everybody here. We'll put a microphone in the middle of the room. We'll also try and be mindful of those of you who are sitting up in the balcony section tonight to get to as many of you as possible. We ask your cooperation in keeping your questions short and to the point and making sure that they are indeed questions so that we can get to as many of your insightful queries as possible tonight. So without further ado, let me welcome Liz Stark to the podium, who is going to formally introduce our guest speaker tonight. Liz is a third year here at the college. She is majoring in political science as well as gender studies. She has been involved at the IOP heavily since arriving on campus. She's a member of our student advisory board. She's also currently the interviews editor for The Gate, which is our student-run political journal. And most recently, she spent this summer as a broadcast media intern in the White House. So it's very fitting that she's here to kick us off today. Please join me in welcoming Liz Stark. Liz?
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the road to 2016 with Jorge Ramos. After immigrating to the United States in 1983, Ramos became one of the youngest national news anchors in the history of American television at age 28. Ramos has covered some of the most important news stories of the last 2 decades, including the fall of the Berlin Wall, 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and 5 wars spanning from El Salvador to Afghanistan. Ramos is a fierce advocate for immigration reform and epitomizes what it means to be a fearless journalist, holding politicians and presidents accountable for their actions. Ramos has interviewed world leaders such as President Obama, former presidents George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, Hugo Chavez, Fidel Castro, and many others. Currently, Ramos is a newscaster for Noticiero Univision, an anchor for Al Punto, Univision's weekly public affairs program, and the host of Fusion's America with Jorge Ramos. He is also the author of 10 books and writes a weekly column for more than 40 newspapers distributed across the United States and Latin America. Throughout his prolific career, Ramos has received the Maria Morris Cabot Award and 8 Emmy Awards for excellence in journalism. Ramos is considered a, quote, star newscaster of Hispanic TV and is listed as one of the 10 most admired Latinos by Latino Leaders magazine. Most importantly, Ramos has been called a voice for the voiceless. We are honored to have such a powerful voice here with us tonight, so please join me in welcoming Jorge Ramos.
Thank you. Gracias, muchas gracias. Thanks. I guess I will need the cell phone for a while. Let me put it over here. So what are you doing here? Are you watching the debate tonight? No? You decided not to watch the debate tonight. Anyway, we can talk about the debate in just a moment. But in the next 45 minutes, an hour, I'm going to be talking to you about journalism and about politics and about the role of journalism. and about the future of Latinos, why something is changing, something magical is changing, because when I first arrived in the United States, 1983, we were just a few, 15 million Latinos here. And I think lately, something big is happening. In other words, we're going from big numbers to power, and that's new for us. That's new, and that sense of power and the possibility of changing things in our country is new, and I'll be talking about that. But let me first start with journalism, which is what I do. If you see my Twitter account, you'll see that first I define myself as an immigrant. I can change that. I'm just an immigrant and a journalist. And those two things define me. I'm an immigrant and I'm a journalist. But lately, since I had a problem with someone called Donald Trump, people have been asking me, are you an activist or are you a journalist? When David Axelrod invited me here, I thought that one of the most important things as a journalist is to ask tough questions. And I'm sure many of you are great journalists. And I'm sure that was the question that you were going to ask me. Are you an activist or are you a journalist? And my answer is, and you can challenge me later, and my answer is that I'm just a reporter asking questions. However, there are some times in which as a journalist, you have to take a stand. Otherwise, you're not doing your job. Of course, as a journalist, you have to be accurate. If 5 people die, you have to say 5. If it's red, it's red. That's very important. You have to be accurate and precise. However, many times, you have to leave neutrality to the side, and you have to take a stand when it comes to racism, discrimination, corruption, public lies, dictatorships, human rights. You have to take a stand. If you don't take a stand, then you're not really doing your job. The best examples that we have of great journalism are when reporters had the courage to take a stand. Edward R. Murrow did it against Senator Joe McCarthy. Walter Cronkite did it during the Vietnam War when he criticized the war. The reporters of the Washington Post, when they forced the resignation of President Richard Nixon. We have many examples. And even Anderson Cooper, after Hurricane Katrina, when he criticized the terrible response of the Bush administration after the hurricane. So those are great examples of good journalism. And now, when we don't do that, I think we are failing our profession. And I have the best example of when that happened. When President George W. Bush decided to invade Iraq in 2003, I think that we as reporters, as a group, we made a huge mistake. Let me be very clear here. There were a few reporters, not a lot of them, but there were a few reporters who had the courage to challenge President George W. Bush publicly. However, that was not enough. And the problem is that, of course, Saddam Hussein was a terrible dictator, but Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. And in Iraq, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And as journalists, we didn't do our jobs correctly. Some reporters did, again. But in general, as reporters, we didn't challenge those who are in power. And this is what I have to say tonight. I think the most important social responsibility that we have as journalists is to challenge those who are in power. That's our job, to question them, to challenge them. So if you are the friend of the president, or the friend of the senator, or the mayor, or you are a friend of the candidate, it's going to be very difficult to do your job. Because what are you going to do? I think our role as journalists is to be outside the circle of power. We have to be right on the edge in between the White House and the street. We have to be right on the edge in between the candidate and the voters. In other words, our role is to be the anti-power. That's where we get our power. Our role, again, let me repeat that, is to be the anti-power. That's where we get our responsibility, our credibility, and our value. So this is the context. And going back to the question, am I an activist or a reporter? I'm a reporter. I'm just a journalist who sometimes takes a stand when it is needed to take a stand. I think that immigration rights are human rights, and that when somebody says that Mexican immigrants, and I'm a Mexican immigrant, when somebody says that some Mexican immigrants are criminals, rapists, and drug traffickers, as a reporter, you have to take a stand. When more than 2 million people have been deported in this country, when thousands of families have been deported, and we have done nothing in Congress, I think you have to take a stand. So I brought 3 interviews that I've done lately to give you an idea of what I've done, and then you can tell me if you like it or you can criticize me. So my first interview was with President Barack Obama. Let me put it in context. I'm from Mexico. Had I done the same thing with the president in Latin America, I don't know if I would be here. But the beauty, really, remember, in the last decade, more than 80 journalists have died in Mexico, 80 journalists. So I left Mexico because I didn't want to be a censored journalist, but I didn't want to be a killed journalist either. And just imagine the beauty of living in a country with a First Amendment in which you can go to the White House, talk to the president, criticize his policies, and then go back to your home and go to the supermarket without a bodyguard. That's beautiful, and we have to take advantage of that. So first of all, I have to thank President Barack Obama because even though we don't agree on many things, and you know I've criticized him for not keeping his promise on immigration reform during his first year in office, he has always welcomed me to talk to him. So the last interview that I had with him, we had a problem with deportations. Why has he deported more than 2 million immigrants? And this is his response, so let's listen. As you're saying, you always had the legal authority to stop deportations. Then why did you deport 2 million people?
Jorge, we're not going to.
For 6 years you did it. You
listen,
destroyed
Jorge,
many families.
Jorge,
they called you deporter in chief.
You called me deporter in chief. I did
Janet
not.
Murguia from the
But let me say this, Jorge.
But you could have stopped deportation.
No.
That's the whole idea.
That is not true. Listen, here's the fact of the matter.
You could have stopped them.
Jorge, here's the fact of the matter. As President of the United States, I'm always responsible for problems that aren't solved right away. I regret millions of people who didn't get health insurance before I passed health insurance and before I implemented it. I regret the fact that there are kids who should have been going to college during my presidency, but because we didn't get to them fast enough, they gave up on college. The question is, are we doing the right thing, and have we consistently tried to move this country in a better direction? And those like you sometimes, Jorge, who suggest that there are simple, quick answers to these problems. I think no, yes, you do, because that's how you present it. And I think when you present it in that way, it does a disservice because it makes the assumption that the political process is one that can easily be moved around depending on the will of one person, and that's not how things work. No, we spent that entire time trying to get a comprehensive immigration reform bill done that would solve the problem for all the people. So right now, by the actions that I've taken, I still have 5 million people who do not have the ability to get registered and be confident that they're not deported. In fact, what's going to happen sometime over the next 2 days, week, month, is that there are going to be some folks who are still caught up in the system because we have to go and train ICE workers so that they are responding in a different way. Okay, so this is what happens when there's an issue, and as a reporter, who's going to talk for the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country? The fact is that President Barack Obama has deported more than 2 million, almost 2.5 million undocumented immigrants in this country. I think that we are partly responsible for that because they don't come here to go to Disneyland. Immigrants come here because there are thousands of companies who give them jobs, and because there are millions of Americans, including all of you and me, who benefit from their work. So that's when I thought that I had to take a position. In other words, even with the President of the United States, even though that I know that he's for immigration reform, there are times when you have to confront those who are in power. So I just tried to be consistent. So that's one idea that I wanted to present to you. The other idea is that many times in this country, it is difficult to be a Latino.
It is difficult to be immigrant simply because of your accent, and I have a very strong accent. When I first arrived in this country, I couldn't even understand myself. And it's true, I couldn't even understand myself. And then my son, Nicholas, he's 17, and Paola, 28, they constantly correct me. And I really appreciate them, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to be here with you. So, but the fact is, just imagine being in Arizona, being stopped in a car, and then that I could have a conversation with a police officer, and that he recognizes that I have an accent, or that my color of the skin is a little darker, or that I'm simply a Latino because I was listening to salsa music or to rancheras in the radio. And then what would happen? Well, that's what happened when I went to see Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona. And he says that he's done nothing wrong. The Justice Department says that he's been racial profiling Latinos, and that he's been stopping Latinos simply because of the color of their skin, simply because of their accent, simply because of their country of origin, or their parents' country of origin. So again, that was a moment in which I thought that we had to take a stand, that I had to take a stand. So I went to Arizona and went to Tent City, 98 degrees on the shadows, and I spoke with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and this is our conversation. The Justice Department said that you have intentionally and systematically discriminated against Latinos. Your office has been stopping Latinos in their vehicles 4 to 9 times more than non-Latino drivers. Isn't that discrimination?
No,
Isn't
that's,
that racial profiling?
Hold on, that's their opinion. We had 287G working under the federal government, had the authority to do that.
It's not an opinion, it's a fact.
I don't know
4
what you're
to
reading.
9 times more than
Well,
non-Latino
that's their
drivers.
opinion. I don't know where they get that.
They did the research.
Okay, did so much research. Why did we sign an agreement last week? Nothing happened. It's all been dropped. Okay?
It's not dropped. You reach an agreement with them. But the fact remains that
it's been
if you're a
dropped. The judge
Latino in
dropped that
Maricopa County,
excuse me, the judge dropped that lawsuit. Okay? This has been going on 100 days after Obama took office, and Holder, they started this investigation.
But this is clearly racial profiling, Sheriff. If you stop Latinos 4 to 9 times more than non-Latinos, that's racial profiling. That's discrimination.
No, it isn't. Depends where you're
it
at.
is.
It depends. If
I'm a Latino and I'm driving and they stop me simply because of my accent or because of the way I look, it's racial profiling. And that's what you've been doing.
No.
Of course, that's what you've been doing for years, since 2006.
If you're patrolling in a Mexican area, I would presume the majority would be Mexican, right? That makes sense?
Yeah, but overall,
well, those
4 to
are
9 times.
statistics. I'm not familiar with it. All I'm telling you, that has been settled with an agreement.
You can just read the document, and it's there. All right, so Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Again, somebody, as a reporter, and it's not only me, there are many reporters who are doing that, but you have to take a stand. And let me repeat when you have to take a stand. When in cases of racism, discrimination, corruption, public lies, I mean, if you lie to your brother or sister, that's different. I'm talking public lies. When it comes to dictatorships, Fidel Castro, Raúl Castro, Hugo Chavez, and when it comes to human rights, that's when, as a reporter, I truly believe you have to take a stand. If you're in the circle of power, nothing is going to happen. And then, Donald Trump. Let me put it in perspective what happened. June 16, he said that some Mexican immigrants are criminals, drug traffickers, and rapists. I know, I'm a Mexican immigrant. I know that's not true. All the studies that I've seen conclude that immigrants are less likely to be criminals. Absolutely. It's very simple. If you're an immigrant, you don't want to get in trouble with the police. You're here to work. You don't want to get in trouble to the police and be deported. So what he was saying, I knew that he was wrong. Not only what I knew, but all the research that I had seen. So I did what any other reporter has done in the past. I wrote a letter, handwritten letter. I put my cell phone number, and then I sent him a letter, FedEx. He read it the next day, and then he published it on the internet. He published the letter with my cell phone number in it. So guess what happened? I had to get this new phone. which is better, by the way. So first lesson, never, ever, ever give your cell phone number to Donald Trump. No? Okay. That was June 16. 2 months later, so again, as a reporter, as a journalist, we had to confront Donald Trump. We had to tell him that regardless of what he was saying, the vast majority of Latinos have a negative opinion of him. Many Latinos, you know them, I know them, despise him. And we know that what he's suggesting when it comes to immigration is absolutely wrong. Why? Well, I mean, he wants to deport 11, can you imagine that? He wants to deport 11 million people in 2 years. That means that he would have to, it would be, we're talking about the largest mass deportation in recent history. Just imagine the image of the United States outside, and just imagine the human rights violation in this country. That means that he would have to deport about 15,000 immigrants every single day, and that would be like filling about 30 747s every single day. He wants to build a 1,900-mile wall in between Mexico and the United States, and it's really a silly idea. It isn't going to work because almost 40% of immigrants come with a visa. They overstay their visas, and many of them come by plane. So why are you going to build a wall that somebody's going to cross flying or with a visa? And then, of course, he wants to get rid of, deny citizenship to the children born to undocumented parents. The only problem is the Constitution. You cannot change the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So I wasn't going to have an interview with Donald Trump because he obviously didn't want to give me an interview since he published my cell phone number. So we made a plan of going to Dubuque, Iowa, 2 months later, and then go to a press conference and then ask a question. So when I tried to ask a question, this is what happened, and you've seen it.
Mr. Trump will take questions for approximately 15 minutes.
Mr. Trump, I have a question about immigration. Your immigration plan is full of empty promises. Mr. Trump, I have a question. I have a question for you. No, Mr. Trump. No, I'm a reporter as an immigrant and as a U.S. citizen. I have the right to ask the question, and this is the question. No, I have the right to ask the question, and this is no. This is the question. You cannot deport 11 million. You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1,900-mile wall. You cannot deny citizenship to children in this country. And with those ideas, I'm a reporter, and don't touch me, sir. Don't touch me, sir. You cannot touch me. I have the right to ask a question.
Yes, in order.
I have the right to ask a question. So I have the right to ask a question.
So I was very.
I'll tell you what happened later. They allowed me to come back.
I love the evangelicals. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Absolutely.
For
good.
Allowing me
Good to have you back.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So here's the problem with your immigration plan. It's full of empty promises. You cannot deport 11 million undocumented immigrants. You cannot deny citizenship to the children in this country. You cannot build a 19...
Why do you say that?
You cannot do that.
Well,
you have to change the
Constitution.
No, you have to.
No, excuse me.
You have to change the Constitution, Mr. Trump.
A lot of people, but a lot of people think that's not right. That an act of Congress can do it. Now,
but what are you
possibly
going
to have to be tested in court. But a lot of people think that if you come and you're on the other side of the border, I'm not talking about Mexico. Somebody on the other side of the border, a woman is getting ready to have a baby. She crosses the border for one day, has the baby. All of a sudden, for the next 80 years, hopefully longer. But for the next 80 years, we have to take care of it.
Anyway, so the question is, how are you going to build a 1,900 miles wall? How are you going to
I'm a builder.
Well,
That's
not
easy.
only it would
I
cost
build
at
buildings
least
that are 90,
it would
40.
cost at least
Can I
$20
tell you what's
billion.
more complicated? What's more complicated is building a building that's 95 stories tall.
But it's completely unnecessary. It's a waste of time and money. Almost 40, of course, almost 40% of immigrants.
A lot of people don't think so.
No, almost 40% of immigrants come by plane. They simply overstay their visa. So you would be
I don't believe
spending
that.
time and money.
But it's not. I don't believe it.
Well, so that's.
And the drugs come, I see them, they have pictures, they have everything crawling over the fences, which are, by the way, this high. I mean, you have fences that are not as tall as I am.
All right. So that was Donald Trump. So what happened really in terms of solidarity, I want to say two things. First, that as reporters, and this is if you're studying journalism, and if you're studying, it doesn't matter what happened, what you want to study. It is important to realize that you have power. It would be a very different exchange with Donald Trump had I stayed seated. We made the decision of asking that question standing up. And it is important because how you present yourselves, how you use your own body is important because there needed to be a balance in terms of authority. And then you realize how my microphone was getting his words exactly as his words. So it doesn't matter that he says, excuse me all the time. You have the right to ask a question, and your comments are important as his comments. Now, he is saying that Latinos love him. That's wrong. That is not true. The latest poll that I saw, 11% of Latinos, only 11% of Latinos have a positive image of Donald Trump. And let me tell you something. If he only gets 11% of the Hispanic vote, if he wins the Republican nomination, he's going to lose the White House. John McCain got 31% of the Hispanic vote, 2008, and lost the election. Mitt Romney got 27% of the Hispanic vote in the last election. He lost the White House. So with 11%, there's no way that Donald Trump can win the White House. And here's the problem. He has a lot of money, right? However, he does not understand the new America. And the new America is an America in which is going to be defined by the fact that we will be, and we are multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial. Let me take you to 2055, and then I'll stop right there. I'll be 97, so I'll be very lucky if I'm here. But most likely you'll be here. In 2055, the white population will be a minority in this country. In other words, everyone, whites, African Americans, Latinos, and Asians, all of us are going to be minorities. So the idea of Donald Trump of trying to win the White House only with the white vote, it simply isn't going to work. That theory isn't going to work. So 2 things to learn tonight. 1, this is a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic country, and that's the trend that we are seeing. 2nd, take a stand when it really matters. And 3rd, don't give your cell phone to Donald Trump. Okay, thank you.
We're now going to open up the floor to your questions for Jorge Ramos. There's a microphone here in the center, and for those of you who have a question, we invite you to approach the microphone with it now. Let me follow up as we wait for those to formulate their questions in the line to form, to ask you a couple of things. First of all, on our way over here, we were talking about Donald Trump and that instance, and you were remarking, we were talking about the fact that during the 2012 election, Donald Trump actually was critical of Mitt Romney for statements he made regarding self-deportation. I mean, he was taking a more pro-immigrant posture at that time. So what's going on, in your view, with Donald Trump and this issue?
It's interesting because in the last election, Donald Trump flip-flopped on immigration because he had said that Mitt Romney was wrong by suggesting that self-deportation was going to be the right policy. In other words, many people thought that Donald Trump was pro-immigrant. And then suddenly he comes, he announces on June 16, and then he changes completely his speech. So I'm not his psychologist, and I don't know exactly why he changed his point of view. But the fact is that that was not his original position. And his criticism of Mitt Romney is not consistent with his policy right now. The only explanation is that he thought that by criticizing immigrants, that he could get the Republican nomination. What he didn't understand, I think, is that he has a ceiling with that point of view, that his theory is wrong, and that he's not going to be able to win the White House without the Hispanic vote. I think he made a huge mistake by attacking immigrants in such a way.
One other follow-up that relates to this before we go to the floor here. You were criticized and heralded for the confrontation. There's larger debate to have within the circles of journalism around the tactics and your approach as it relates to advocacy. Leaving aside the point of view that you articulate, I think, quite well here around the need to take a stand, especially when people are being demonized, I think you would also agree that there's a legitimate policy debate about what should immigration policy be going forward, a debate that's happening within the immigrant community and more broadly in society. How do you view your role as a journalist in that conversation?
I think I have to make sure that the voices that are not being heard. When was the last time that you saw on the big networks or on cable networks and on undocumented immigrants expressing their point of view? Many of your parents. It's not there. So I think my role is to make sure that those voices are being heard. And my role is I'm very fortunate that I'm an immigrant with a voice, because I have a paper that says that I'm a US citizen. And I think I have to use that voice to let everybody know in English, not only in Spanish, in English, what's happening in this country with the undocumented immigrants. So I think that's precisely my role, making sure that those who are invisible are visible. And I think as journalists, it is appropriate and acceptable, legitimate, and sometimes an obligation to make sure that you present all the points of view and not those only who are against undocumented immigrants.
Let's take questions from the floor. Yes, sir.
Hi. As a Venezuelan immigrant, I would like to thank you for taking such a strong stance against the regimes of Maduro and Chavez. Where do you see Venezuela in the next 5 years?
Yeah. Your name?
Jorge.
Jorge.
Much like yourself.
Well, maybe not in the next 5 years. I think we have elections in Venezuela in just a few weeks, early December. It is quite likely the opposition might win. There's only one problem. The problem is that the organism, the institution that counts the votes, is completely controlled by Maduro. But right now, there's a very important debate going on in Venezuela. And in that sense, for instance, I had the opportunity to talk with Hugo Chavez many times, 3 times. And it is important to challenge the presidents who think that they are indispensable and that they are breaking the Constitution. I remember asking Hugo Chavez if he was going to give up power after 5 years, and he said, absolutely. He stayed 13 years. So with dictatorships, and I think Venezuela is becoming a dictatorship, it's very difficult to know exactly what's going to happen. So my concern is that the Maduro government might not respect the results in December, and that he might want to stay longer than that. Nombre.
Sofia Olazaba. Good afternoon, Jorge.
Hello.
Just to give you a little background, I'm a first-generation Mexican-American woman. My parents immigrated from Mexico, and what I wanted to say is, I'm aware that as Latinos, we're growing, not only in numbers, but our purchasing power. And the question that I have is to slightly reference the situation that you were in with Donald Trump, which, by the way, thank you so much for standing up. But in terms of us, what can we do to stand up? Where do you envision us or see us doing so that we can change this, the politics in 2016? Because there's a lot of discrimination going on, and there has been. But what can we do once we get past that, or where do you see us going?
First of all, don't sit down. Because he was telling me, sit down. He was saying, go back to Univision. And then after I left the room, I was forced to leave the room, somebody outside the room told me, go back to your country. I said, well, this is my country, where should I go? So that's, I think, is very dangerous when a candidate promotes bigotry and discrimination and intolerance. So I think our role is first with those who surround us. When you hear things like that, not only from Donald Trump, but from people who surround you, you have to say no. I mean, I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to sit down. I'm going to speak up. I think that's the most important thing. Second, I think for the first time with the Trump event, I think we are responding with power. When he said those things, many companies decided to break up with him. For the first time, in the past, whenever we were insulted and offended, and it happened many, many times, nothing happened. But for the first time, we are responding power with power. And third, the most important, please go and vote. Because that's the most important thing. Let me give you a number. For the next election, 26 million Latinos will be eligible to vote. 26 million Latinos. We can change the election. Of course, not all of them are going to go to vote. But in the last election, President Obama won by less than 5 million votes. So just imagine what 15 million or 16 million votes could do. So make sure that everybody votes and speak up.
Yeah. Hola, Jorge.
Hola.
I am background. I'm a journalism student at Northwestern University, and I am international. I'm from El Salvador in Mexico, and I am one of 2 international Latino students in Medill, which is not good. What's your advice for us international Latino journalists on how to cover and represent our countries and our people in newsrooms that are not diverse enough, or that are full of point of views that don't reflect or represent us?
Again, I think it's important that we tell our stories. And the same thing that he was asking me about undocumented immigrants. I think you have to make sure that the stories of the countries and the people that are not being taught or not being informed enough, that's your responsibility. So you're saying only two students?
Only 2 Latina international students.
Only 2.
So it's me from El Salvador and Mexico, and my friend from Mexico.
And then the rest, how many other students?
There's a lot of international students in Medill, but most of them come from Europe or Asia.
Okay, this idea of being underrepresented, it's all over the place. We're so used to being minorities, so let's use that power. I mean, it's okay, but put it in perspective. We are 18% of the population Latinos, and we only have 3 senators. So we're used to being underrepresented. We're growing, everything's gonna change soon, but your role right now is to, again, speak up and represent the stories that are the stories of the invisible, those who are not being heard. That's your responsibility, and take it on your own.
Also, te mandan saludos de la Universidad Iberoamericana.
Ah, gracias,
Yeah.
gracias. That's where I studied in Mexico City. I studied in Universidad Iberoamericana, and then I came here to, I'm sorry to say, UCLA Extension. So I
Jorge,
should say that at the University of Chicago.
Forgive me for jumping in. Can you talk for just a quick minute, because it relates to her question, about what's happening at Fusion? A newsroom built around a new multicultural, multi-ethnic generation. I think it's a really exciting experiment, not just for viewers, but for what journalists can perceive as possible in the construction of a news operation.
Yeah, I'm working for Fusion. Fusion is a new network. It's a partnership between ABC News and Univision. We thought it was going to be for young Latinos, but you as young Latinos, you know that you don't want to be put in a box. You don't want, oh, Fusion is for me. So fortunately, we did a lot of research before, and we realized that instead of aiming at just getting young Latinos to watch us, trying to get all millennials to watch us. And then we realized that we are in a very difficult moment. There's a transition in the mass media right now. And the transition is that, just imagine, I'm producing television for people who don't even own a TV. How many of you don't own a TV? Look at that. Exactly. So I'm trying to produce TV for you, and you don't even. It's so difficult. Now, the problem with that is that we know that in the social media is working because it's reaching a lot of people, but we don't know how to make money out of that. So if you're a journalist and you want a job, there's not a lot of money for you right now. But that's the new media, in which half the people that watch our shows don't own a TV, and we have to adapt to that media, precisely. And young Latinos and millennials are the future. Millennials and Latinos will define who's going to be the next president.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Manuel, a graduate of political science and also from Mexico. And by the way, you've got a great role in the Mexican policy recently. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So people in Mexico talk about your style of journalism, because this is something that people do not see often, right? So I just wanted to ask, I mean, beyond being courageous and really having the courage to ask difficult questions and going to ask them to politicians. I mean, how would you define your style of interviewing, of getting the information, of talking to politicians, and who inspired it? Did you have an inspiration, a journalism inspiration for that?
Let me start with that part. I think in Mexico, women reporters are fantastic. We have many examples that show that women are incredibly courageous in Mexico. But I have two role models. Oriana Fallaci, the Italian journalist, even though at the end of her life she was very critical of Muslims and she made many anti-immigrant remarks. As a reporter before, many decades before, she was fantastic. I don't know if you read a book called Interview with History. And she confronted everyone, from Henry Kissinger to the Shah of Iran. And that style of interviewing I really like, because she defined an interview as a war in which sometimes the interviewee would win and sometimes the interviewer would win, but always a war. And I took from her two lessons. The first one is that you have to believe that if you personally don't ask that question, nobody else is going to ask it. That's the most important thing. Don't wait, or Fulanito is going to ask that question. No, it's your responsibility. And it's tough. I mean, you know, when you have to ask a question and it's the right question, if your palms start sweating and you get nervous, that's the question you have to ask. Not only if you're a journalist or not, but if it makes you nervous, you know that something is going to change, that there's a possibility of change in that, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's with your boss, maybe it's a president, but if you know that there's nervousness, that's the right question. And the second idea is that, especially with those in power, you have to assume that you will never talk to them again. And if you do that, you approach the interview with a different attitude, because, you know, it's the last time they want to invite me for lunch again. I can do it. And it works. Then the beauty of the United States is that you can be critical of the president in the White House and he'll invite you back. That's beautiful. In other words, they'll kill you. No? In other countries, they'll kill you for doing something like that. In this country is the First Amendment, and the civility that we have in the public discourse, regardless of what we hear, is just fantastic. No? The other reporter this is my idol, is Elena Poniatowska, a reporter, she's 82 right now, who single-handedly reported about a massacre in 1968 in which hundreds of Mexican students were killed. She was the only reporter who reported about that, and now we know what happened. And then, of course, now we have in Mexico great reporters, Carmen Aristegui, who's a representative of the best of journalism in Mexico.
Hello. So while I was interning in Iowa, I actually had the opportunity to see you confront Trump in his news conference, which was really cool.
You were there?
Yes, I was in the room.
Oh, good.
So my question is, were you pleased with the national and international coverage of that incident? Or do you think that some of the headlines and some of the ideas that people had about that interaction was sort of out of context? And then my other question is why you chose Iowa, and if you had any sort of any interest in talking to interest groups there, pro-immigration interest groups that may be able to help you more with immigration policies on the ground and have a continued influence on the elections.
Well, we chose Iowa simply because it's the first state that's going to have it. So it has an importance. The second one is that I knew that there were going to be fewer reporters in Dubuque, Iowa, than in any other city. So I needed space where I could operate. And those are the things that you have to take into consideration. TV doesn't happen. You know that. Radio doesn't happen. You produce TV. And TV has two elements. One is content, then the other is performance. Performance doesn't mean that you act. But on TV, there's a part of that is a performance. And the microphone doesn't appear right there. The lights don't appear. What happens is that you produce TV. And then the headlines, I think Donald Trump is the one who made the headline. Had he answered my question, we wouldn't be talking about him right now. What he did was really cowardly, which is called a bodyguard to throw me out of a press conference. I think that's what's out of line. That he's the one who made the headline.
Tell me really quickly how you produced that, beyond going there. I mean, you have 2 cameras in the room?
Always, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a 2-camera shot. That's rare for a journalist on the beat. He'd have a camera in the back of the room, or she'd have a camera in the back of the room, pointing straight at the podium.
Exactly.
So where were your cameras?
Exactly. So we brought 3 cameras.
3 cameras?
We had 1 camera on the back. Yeah, it's only one chance. He's not going to repeat that again. So you have 1 camera on the back, and then another camera right in front of me, who was that's the camera that recorded what I was saying, and then there were other cameras that helping us too.
Yeah.
So,
and you were mic'd, and Trump, his audio was also mic'd, but not always up. You were using ambient audio, so your actual voice was more present in the audio at times than was his.
Exactly, and then at the end, when you present that, because when you're in the room, you only hear Trump's voice, but TV is different. With TV, I have a microphone, you have a microphone, and then his voice is as loud as mine. And then when you present it on TV, it's a different balance. So yeah, again, TV doesn't happen. You produce TV. Radio doesn't happen. You produce radio. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm going to be shorter on my answers because of if you want to see the debate.
And I'll stop interjecting, yeah.
Okay, my name is Yang, and I'm a political science student. I'm doing a study about journalistic professionalism, and just now you mentioned something that really interesting. You talk about 80 journalists die in the past 10 years,
10 years in Mexico.
And I also do a lot of study on Chinese journalism. So you also talk about the strategy of anti-power. To refrain from the circle of power, you need to gain strength from simply being out of this circle of power. So what do you think, what would be your suggestion? What would be your alternative suggestion to those journalists in those, authoritarian country? What are, some of the other suggestions you can
We need brave, courageous reporters in authoritarian regimes. And otherwise, we wouldn't know exactly what's going on. So we need reporters in Cuba, we need reporters in China, we need reporters in Venezuela. But the problem is, not only in those countries, but in all countries, is when you are too close to power, it is very difficult to cover the news. So if this is the circle of power, and you're seated right here, it's impossible to be able to report objectively, independently. You cannot do that. If you have to choose between being a friend or being an enemy of a dictator, you better choose to be the enemy. And I know it's very easy for me to say this in the United States. That's why I'm here. This is mi trinchera. I don't know exactly how to translate that. My foxhole. But the fact is that I can go to Mexico and Venezuela and Cuba, come back, and then go home and ride my bike and play tennis and soccer, and nothing happens to me. It would be a different story in other countries. But if you choose to, but here's the final, if you choose to be a reporter, you have to realize that your role is to be outside power. If you are with power, I don't think you're doing your job. I think, again, our role as journalists is to be the anti-power. And if you define your power that way, then you're doing your job and you're credible. If you're just repeating what the party is saying and what the government is saying, no one is going to believe you. And if nobody believes what you say as a journalist, your job doesn't matter. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I am a graduate from the university class of 2011, and I'm also undocumented. So I'm one of the 11 million undocumented people living here in the US. So I appreciate all the work, everything that you've done on our behalf, representing our stories, both in a sympathetic manner, but also showing the reality of the deportations, that it's not just about the DREAM Act, it's not just about me, it's about my mother and my father. I want to, and I thank you for bringing up the issue of Latinos voting, but I think in the last few years we've also seen the undocumented community taking a role in the elections. Everything from 2010, when we as undocumented youth changed the conversation of comprehensive immigration reform in April, May 2010, to finally getting a vote for the DREAM Act in December of 2010 through our storytelling, through our direct actions, our civil disobedience. It didn't happen, but in 2012, again, election season, we were there, we were protesting, we were direct action, everything, and we got DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, a benefit that I have now. And 2014, another election season, and what did we get? An announcement for administrative relief. Unfortunately, it stalled in the courts, but it was a lot of the protesting, a lot of our work, both ours and our parents now, the adults, the adult generation coming out and sharing their stories. And so I'm just wondering what you think our role as undocumented people can be for this upcoming election. What stories do we need to share, do we need to tell, so that we can get other, everyone that's running for president to take us seriously and not treat us the way that Donald Trump treats us, not portray us the way that he does, but also take us seriously as a power. Even though I can't vote, what can I do? How can I encourage, others to take my issue seriously?
Yeah. What I've said many times, and I repeat it now, I think the dreamers for me are my heroes, because what I'm doing in journalism is exactly just following your steps, confronting in your face the members of Congress, the White House, the candidates. That's exactly what you had to do, and you did it. What it was, remember when the Dreamer movement started, there were 4 students who had the crazy idea of walking from Miami to Washington, and I thought they were going to be detained and deported, and they changed everything. And your style of fighting, that's what has changed the conversation and what got DACA to you and to many others. So I would do exactly the same thing that you've been doing, because it's been successful. So thank you so much for talking like that and for coming out in a place like this. Thank you.
Because we have a number of questions, what I'd love to do is actually take 2 at a time here for a second.
Or more, if you want to all.
Why don't we do 3 at a time here? We'll do you first, and then we'll go to the next 2. We'll park those questions, have you answer them, and then we'll move on to try and get to as many of you tonight as possible. So we'll see if that works for us. Yes?
Okay, 3 things real quick. First of all, hopefully, on behalf of all the women here, we love your Time magazine cover.
Oh, thank you.
I have to mention that.
Me too.
But getting to the serious stuff, somebody taught me, once poor, always poor. So as an undocumented immigrant, then a dreamer, and now legal, as they call us, I raised the double advocate's position because aren't we a little bit naive? I've been through this process since 2000. We were very close before 9/11. We got real close in 2005. But we're not teaching political participation. Fusion, for example, I love it, and I follow you to that. But they have this campaign called Dear Next President.
Yeah.
Aren't we naive to think the president can do this thing by himself? We have to participate, we have to vote, and we only show up to the polls, once there's a presidential election. So that's one question. And
all right, very quickly, the second one. I just want to be respectful of everyone else here, if you don't mind.
Yes, the second is, in terms of thinking of immigration reform, why aren't we breaking it up into categories? The grandma that takes care of the kids, the professional who still doesn't have papers, the dreamer, the agricultural worker. Wouldn't that give a better solution than just a plain 11 million documented immigrants don't separate families. That's it.
Let's stay with those two because there's a lot to unpack there, and then we'll move on there.
I think I have to support comprehensive immigration reform for everything. Maybe at the end, if you want to negotiate, then we'll be able to do it step by step. Now, maybe we are naives, but what you've achieved as dreamers was really naive at the beginning. People thought it wasn't going to work, and it worked. So I think the strategy that dreamers have implemented, that is the right strategy. And I would keep on pushing to everyone, because at the end, they have to listen. They're not going to deport 11 million, and they have to deal with the fact that there are 55 million Latinos here supporting them. So might sound naive, but what was naive at the beginning really worked. So I'll just continue doing the same thing. Thank you.
And we'll do a couple of short questions here.
Hi, I'm Lauren from the neighborhood. I'll go straight in. Go back to Univision, go back to Mexico. You know what comes next. Go back to Africa. Everybody where we knew what Donald Trump is talking about. White supremacy, and in particular, white male supremacy. What can black and brown people do to come together to fight that?
Next question, yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Jorge Ramos. I'm not from here. I'm interning under U.S. State Department. So I'm really happy to be seeing you face to face. I saw your interview with Donald Trump. Okay, so I'm happy. My questions
please.
I come from a country where in which people are doing the transactional journalism, in which because people as a journalist cannot make enough money, they sell the news. They work with the business owners to make news. Business owners very close to the power. What do you want to?
Where do you come from?
I come from Indonesia,
okay.
Yeah, and so the business owners, they have power, and the journalists, they do transactional kind of sell the news, and it makes us cannot believe whatever written in the news now. You know, even though it's proven that they lie, still they're in the power and they have the money. So, can you say anything, because I'm videoing it? Can you say anything for the young journalists in that country on how to be persistent, how to be constantly tell the truth? That's the first one. The second one, what if Donald Trump wins? What are you going to do?
Okay. All right, and last question in this series here, and I'm keeping track here.
Hey, Jorge. My name is Felipe Espinosa. I go to CCSJ. I just want to know, from your immigrant point of view, how would you define the experience of being a journalist, like coming from a different background, speaking a different language? How would you define the experience here in the United States?
Okay. Right. Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to front, and we'll start with this one first.
Yeah, I think it's not what Fusion has given me is the opportunity to talk without translation. Even though I have an accent, now people know what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I've been doing the same thing. It's just that I don't need translation now, and it's been fantastic. We have to understand that the language of power in this country is English, and if we speak that language of power, things are going to change. And about African Americans and Latinos, I think there's a lot to learn from Latinos about the civil rights movement. And that's where we are. I think immigration rights right now are the next frontier of civil rights. And I think we've learned from the African American community to speak up and to say, this is also my country, and I'll defend my country, and I won't shut up. And I think that's very important, very important.
Thank you.
Should we have, why don't you tell me all your questions or your comments, and then I'll just say something at the end? Yeah?
So I initially heard of this event billed as Latino broadcaster Jorge Ramos, and anecdotally, back in my hometown of Houston, Texas, when you had your run-in with Donald Trump over the summer, I mainly heard it portrayed as a Hispanic news reporter who worried about Hispanic issues. So do you ever feel like your cultural identity limits your influence, and do you ever worry about how you can be more broadly heard with the issues that you bring up?
Yeah.
Hi, Jorge. My name's Adrian, and this is my question. So you heralded the First Amendment right here in the U.S. It's fantastic, but a lot of my cousins in Mexico don't really have that same liberty. Many people believe that Peña Nieto was behind the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa. And how do you think that a presidential candidate in our country should engage with the Mexican administration that is so corrupt and just awful human rights record?
Yeah,
Thank you.
By the way, the Obama administration just made sure that $5 million, I know it's not a lot, decided not to send $5 million to the Mexican government as a protest for human rights violations in Mexico. It's the first time that an administration has done something like that because of the 43 students who disappeared. And yes, the army and the Mexican police most likely were involved in their disappearance. And we have to say that if the journalists can't say it in Mexico, we can say it over here. No?
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Juan. Just to go off what we kind of saw Bush push for immigration reform towards the end of his term. We see Obama working for immigration reform towards the end as well. We see Marco Rubio flip-flopping on immigration reform. We see Hillary Clinton flip-flopping as well. It's almost, it seems to me as they're playing with the Hispanic vote a lot. So how are you going to make people aware of these political games they're playing with us? And I guess that's my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it happens every 4 years. I call it the Christopher Columbus syndrome, because every 4 years they rediscover that Latinos are here. They pay a lot of attention to us, and then they forget about us. So that's where we are. Yeah, the only way to do it is making sure that if they promise something, just keep on making sure that we remember. Obama remembers. No?
Let's take these last two, yeah.
Hola, Jorge. Mi nombre es Corina Quiñones, y gracias por ser nuestra voz. My first question is, from your political point of view, what are the three main issues that would need attention, and have you considered running for president?
I was born in Mexico City, so it'll be my son or my daughter, or you, but not me. You know, every poll says that the three most important issues for Latinos is not immigration, and it's true. It's the economy, it's education, it's healthcare. And for immigrants, for us, we're here so our family and our kids could do better than us. So those are the three issues. However, immigration, symbolically and emotionally, is the closest to us. If you say, vote for me, but nobody's going to vote for a candidate who says, vote for me, and then he wants to deport your mom, your son, or your neighbors. No one is going to vote for them.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Saludos, Jorge. My name is Christopher, and this has been an incredible week because my mom in the late 1980s had to leave Lima, Peru because of Sendero Luminoso.
Yeah.
She was a government worker. And this Sunday I was able to thank Luis Gutierrez for his office helping my mother become a citizen.
Wow.
And so I just wanted to ask if any of the Democrats become president, or if someone on the Republican side like Marco Rubio, how do you view the future of comprehensive immigration reform?
It's going to be incredibly difficult right now. In 2013, we were very, very close. Right now, the conversation, because of Donald Trump, has gone to the other side. My real concern is that there might be one generation that might be sacrificed, and that's something that we didn't know, and that's a real possibility. One generation, your parents, who might have to sacrifice for you, and that's the sad part of the story. Anyway, we're going to keep on pushing for that. Paul Ryan is going to become the Speaker of the House, and with him, he was for immigration reform. There's the possibility of doing something.
Let me ask you a related question. A gentleman earlier had asked, what if Trump wins the election? I think you stated earlier that you don't see that as a mathematical possibility in a general election, given the demographics of the United States, fair to say, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Related to this, though, beyond Trump, even on the Republican side, we have three candidates who have, two have Latino heritage, one familial, deep connection to Latino heritage. What are the possibilities for changing the tenor of the conversation over the course of this campaign when you look beyond Trump to a broader field, not only with the Republican, but with the Democrat? What do you see there?
What's really interesting is that when talking about diversity, you're saying, oh, Democrats are more for diversity. Well, I mean, look at the candidates. You have two Latinos with the Republicans, you have an African American with the Republicans, and neither Asians, African Americans, or Latinos with the Democrats. So in terms of diversity, the Democrats say, well, we have President Barack Obama, but that's so 2008, no? So,
as Nicki Minaj would say.
I'm glad you're quoting her. It is possible, it is great that we have two presidential candidates who are Latinos. For the first time in history, we have that. But I can't understand how come the son, Marco Rubio, the son of immigrants from Cuba, or in the case of Ted Cruz, whose father, Rafael Cruz, is from Cuba, how come they are not defending other immigrants like their parents? So I don't know what's going to happen if they become president. I don't know.
All right, can we hold you on for these last two?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ewan. How will immigration reform be different this time from the 1983 amnesty of 3 million people by Reagan, and how will reform this time be a long-term solution instead of just pushing the can down the road and such?
Well, the big difference would have to be that this is not an amnesty. They would have to pay, wait at the end of the line and pay their dues, and making sure that there's a system that won't allow undocumented immigrants to come back. The reality is that they're going to keep on coming. It's an economic problem. And as long as they are making $5 a day in Mexico, Guatemala, or El Salvador, and they can make that same amount of money in half an hour here, they're going to keep on coming. I saw a Pew Research Center study that says that in 2055, there are going to be 78 million immigrants in this country. Right now, there are about 40 million. So they're going to keep on coming. We just have to create a system that allows for them to integrate to this nation. But they're going to keep on coming. I mean, it wouldn't be honest from us to say that they won't be coming. They're going to keep on coming. So we have to create a system that makes sure that everybody integrates to that system.
Hello, Jorge. Congratulations for what you're doing, being the voice of the voiceless. And my question is, how close have you been able to work on the 43 missing students in Mexico? Because we all know that it's very dangerous, you know, to investigate more in there, to go deeper. So how able have you been in?
Well, the truth is that Mexican journalists have been much more courageous than many of us who are outside the United States, outside Mexico. So what I've been doing is simply giving them voice here in this country by publishing whatever they're doing, by talking to them, by interviewing them. Just in the last Sunday, I had an interview with 2 producers who created a documentary about the disappearance of these 43 students and blaming the Mexican army and the Mexican police for them. If we give them voice outside Mexico, they're more protected, and they are the ones who are doing the real job.
Thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Can we close on this question and this note that the gentleman asked earlier? That was the question around your popularity, certainly internationally, but as defined by Latino and Spanish language media largely, your own Latino heritage. Does that limit your influence in some way when it comes to the broader conversation in the United States? What do you think about that?
Not anymore. Not only, I think the great thing that I've realized lately is that, again, we've gone from big numbers to power. And we can say, this is our country. We have power in this country. And we're not going to shut up. We're not going to go. And we're not going to sit down. This is also our country. And I realize that being Latino, it is not that I'm different. It is just that I'm part of the essence of the United States. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm really thankful for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jorge Ramos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.